Rush Hour 2 is a 2001 American action comedy film that stands as the sequel to the massively successful 1998 buddy cop hit Rush Hour. The film was directed by Brett Ratner, who also helmed the original, and it was written by Jeff Nathanson, based on characters created by Ross LaManna. Produced under New Line Cinema, Rush Hour 2 reunited the iconic on-screen duo of Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, whose chemistry had already proven to be box office gold in the first installment. The movie takes the fish-out-of-water buddy formula that made the original so beloved and transplants it into a new setting, shifting much of the action from Los Angeles to Hong Kong, and later to Las Vegas, giving the story a fresh international flavor while retaining the fast-paced humor, martial arts spectacle, and mismatched partnership that fans had come to expect. Rush Hour 2 was produced primarily in the United States, with significant location filming in Hong Kong to capture the authentic look and energy of the region, and it was distributed by New Line Cinema domestically. The film was made on a production budget that was considerably larger than the first film, reflecting the studio's confidence in the franchise following the success of the original, and it went on to become one of the highest-grossing films of 2001 worldwide, cementing Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker as one of the most bankable comedic action duos in Hollywood history. The tone of Rush Hour 2 leans even further into comedy than the first film, blending slapstick humor, witty banter, and culture clash jokes with genuinely impressive martial arts choreography, much of which was performed by Chan himself without the use of stunt doubles, staying true to his reputation as one of the most daring physical performers in the industry. Plot details. The story of Rush Hour 2 picks up some time after the events of the first film, with Los Angeles police detective James Carter, played by Chris Tucker, on vacation in Hong Kong visiting his friend and now Hong Kong Police Inspector Lee, played by Jackie Chan. Carter arrives eager to relax, drink, and enjoy the nightlife of Hong Kong, but Lee, ever the dedicated officer, insists on taking Carter along while he investigates a bombing at the American embassy that killed 2 United States Customs agents. This investigation quickly reveals a much larger and more dangerous conspiracy involving counterfeit currency, a triad crime organization, and a criminal mastermind named Ricky Tan, portrayed by John Lone, who turns out to have a deeply personal connection to Lee's past, since Tan was once a partner of Lee's own father, and has haunted Lee's life ever since his father's death. As Carter and Lee dig deeper into the bombing, they uncover a massive counterfeiting operation being run by Tan in collaboration with a wealthy and seemingly respectable businessman named Stephen Rain, played by Alan King, along with his elegant and dangerous associate Huli, played by Zhang Zi in a breakout role that showcased her martial arts skill and screen presence. The investigation leads Carter and Lee through a series of increasingly chaotic and comedic set pieces, including a memorable and much-loved massage parlor sequence that turns into a brawl, a tense standoff at a nightclub, and various confrontations that highlight both Lee's disciplined fighting style and Carter's brash, motor-mouthed improvisation. The narrative eventually transports the 2 mismatched partners to Los Angeles and then to Las Vegas, where the counterfeiting scheme reaches its climax inside a casino, setting up an explosive final confrontation that ties together the threads of revenge, loyalty, and justice that have been building throughout the film. Along the way, viewers are treated to a subplot involving undercover agent Isabella Molina, played by Rosalind Sanchez, who becomes both a professional ally and a romantic interest for Carter, adding another layer of intrigue as her true loyalties are gradually revealed. The film balances its comedic set pieces with genuine emotional stakes, particularly around Lee's complicated history with Ricky Tan and the truth behind his father's death, giving the action sequences a weight that goes beyond simple spectacle. The final act delivers a satisfying blend of martial arts choreography, gunplay, and comedic timing, culminating in a resolution that rewards Lee's patience and Carter's loyalty while setting the stage for future entries in the franchise. Throughout the film, the screenplay uses the culture clash between Carter's brash American sensibilities and Lee's more reserved, disciplined Hong Kong upbringing as a constant source of comedy, whether through language misunderstandings, differing approaches to police work, or Carter's repeated attempts to impress women and enjoy himself despite Lee's insistence on staying focused on the case. Cast: Jackie Chan stars as Inspector Lee, the disciplined and highly skilled Hong Kong police officer whose personal history with the film's central villain drives much of the emotional core of the story. Chan brought his trademark blend of acrobatic stunt work and understated comedic timing to the role, performing many of his own stunts as he had throughout his career. Chris Tucker returns as Detective James Carter, the fast-talking, high-energy Los Angeles police detective whose comedic instincts and constant one-liners provide much of the film's humor, playing off Chan's more restrained performance to create the buddy dynamic that defines the franchise. John Lone plays Ricky Tan, the film's primary antagonist, a triad leader with a dark connection to Lee's family history, bringing a calculated menace to the role that contrasts with the film's lighter comedic tone. Zhang Zi appears as Hu Li, a dangerous and highly trained enforcer working for the criminal organization, and her performance is notable for showcasing genuine martial arts skill in several of the film's key fight sequences, marking one of her earlier appearances in an American production before she went on to further international fame. Alan King portrays Stephen Rain, a wealthy businessman whose respectable public image masks his involvement in the criminal conspiracy at the heart of the plot. Rosalind Sanchez plays Isabella Molina, an undercover agent whose alliances become a key point of tension and intrigue as the story unfolds, and who also serves as a romantic interest for Carter. Harris Yulin appears as Agent Sterling, a United States Customs official involved in the investigation into the embassy bombing. Additional supporting performances round out the ensemble, including Zi's fellow performers in the Hong Kong set sequences, contributing to the film's authentic sense of place and its blend of American and Hong Kong filmmaking sensibilities. The chemistry between Chan and Tucker remains the true anchor of the cast, with critics and audiences alike praising how naturally their contrasting styles played off one another, a dynamic that had already been established in the first film and was further refined and expanded in this sequel. Release date: Rush Hour 2 was released theatrically in the United States on August 3, 2001, arriving just over 3 years after the original Rush Hour had become a surprise hit in the summer of 1998. The film was positioned as one of the marquee summer releases of 2001, capitalizing on the strong brand recognition established by its predecessor, and the growing star power of both Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in the years between the two films. Upon release, Rush Hour 2 performed exceptionally well at the box office, opening to strong numbers and ultimately grossing well over $300 million worldwide, a substantial increase over the already successful first film, and it remains one of the highest-grossing films of its year. The strong commercial performance of Rush Hour 2 solidified the franchise as one of the most successful action comedy series of its era and paved the way for a third installment years later, further extending the partnership between Chan and Tucker on screen. Trailer information. The theatrical trailer for Rush Hour 2 leaned heavily into the comedic buddy dynamic between Carter and Lee, opening with scenes of Carter arriving in Hong Kong expecting a relaxing vacation only to be immediately pulled into Lee's investigation, setting up the fish-out-of-water premise for audiences who may not have been familiar with the first film. The trailer showcased quick cuts of the film's biggest action set pieces, including glimpses of the massage parlor brawl, high-speed chases, and Chan's signature acrobatic fight choreography, intercut with Tucker's rapid-fire comedic delivery to emphasize the blend of humor and action that defined the franchise. Marketing materials for the film also highlighted the exotic Hong Kong setting as a major selling point, distinguishing the sequel visually from the Los Angeles-based original, while reassuring returning fans that the core partnership and comedic energy remained fully intact. The promotional campaign successfully built anticipation among fans of the original film while also drawing in new viewers with its emphasis on spectacle, humor, and the undeniable star power of its two leads, contributing significantly to the film's strong opening weekend performance and its overall box office success throughout the remainder of the summer of 2001. Full explanation. Rush Hour 2 succeeded in large part because it understood exactly what made the first film work and found ways to amplify those elements rather than simply repeating them. The decision to relocate much of the story to Hong Kong was a clever structural choice, as it flipped the fish-out-of-water dynamic that defined the original film, this time placing Carter in unfamiliar territory rather than Lee, and allowing Chris Tucker's character to be the loud, disoriented outsider navigating a new culture while Jackie Chan's character operated on home turf with confidence and authority. This reversal gave the sequel a fresh dynamic even while preserving the fundamental comedic engine of the franchise, which has always relied on the contrast between Carter's brash, undisciplined energy and Lee's calm, methodical professionalism. The film's action choreography, overseen with Chan's direct involvement given his background as one of the most respected action choreographers in the industry, delivered sequences that balanced genuine athletic skill with comedic timing, a combination that has always been central to Chan's appeal as a performer. Sequences like the massage parlor fight became instantly memorable not just for their physical comedy but for how they integrated humor directly into the choreography itself, with gags and punchlines built into the rhythm of the fight scenes rather than existing separately from them. The film's villain, Ricky Tan, provided a more personal and emotionally resonant threat than the antagonist of the first film, tying the central conflict directly to Lee's family history and giving Jackie Chan's performance an added layer of depth beneath the comedy, particularly in scenes where Lee is forced to confront the truth about his father's death. Zhang Zi's inclusion in the cast added international credibility and genuine martial arts talent to the ensemble, and her fight sequences with Chan are often cited by fans as some of the most technically impressive moments in the film. The film also benefited from a script that never took itself too seriously, allowing Chris Tucker's improvisational comedic style room to breathe while still maintaining enough narrative structure to keep the central mystery involving counterfeit money and the Triad organization coherent and engaging. Critically, the film received a generally positive response upon release, with many reviewers praising the chemistry between Chan and Tucker as the film's strongest asset, even as some critics noted that the plot itself was relatively thin compared to the strength of the character dynamics and action sequences. Audiences, however, responded overwhelmingly positively, and the box office numbers reflected a franchise that had not only maintained its popularity but had actually grown it substantially between installments, a rare achievement for a comedy sequel. Rush Hour 2 also holds a notable place in the broader history of Hollywood's relationship with Hong Kong action cinema, as it represented one of the more prominent examples of a mainstream American blockbuster fully embracing Hong Kong filmmaking talent and aesthetics, both through Chan's direct involvement in shaping the action and through the film's setting and supporting cast. This cultural blending helped introduce broader American audiences to elements of Hong Kong action cinema that had previously existed largely outside the mainstream, contributing to a wider appreciation for the genre in the years that followed. The film's legacy today remains strong, with many fans considering it not only the best entry in the Rush Hour trilogy but one of the definitive buddy cop action comedies of its era, a status reinforced by its enduring popularity on home video, television reruns, and streaming platforms in the decades since its original release. The lasting appeal of Rush Hour 2 ultimately comes down to the effortless chemistry between its two leads, the genuine craftsmanship behind its action sequences, and a willingness to have fun with its premise without ever losing sight of the emotional core that gives the story its stakes. The story of Rush Hour 2 begins in the bustling, neon-lit streets of Hong Kong, where Los Angeles police detective James Carter has finally arrived for the vacation he has been dreaming about for months. After the explosive events of the first film, where Carter and Hong Kong Police Inspector Lee formed an unlikely partnership while recovering a kidnapped Chinese consul's daughter, the two men parted ways as friends, and Carter has spent the time since then promising himself that he would visit Lee in Hong Kong and finally experience the kind of relaxing, indulgent vacation he feels he deserves. He steps off the plane dressed in a loud, colorful outfit, sunglasses perched on his face, practically vibrating with excitement at the thought of days filled with drinking, sightseeing, and enjoying the nightlife of one of Asia's most vibrant cities. Lee meets him at the airport, dressed in his usual understated, professional manner, and the contrast between the two men is immediately apparent and sets the comedic tone for everything that follows. Carter wastes no time announcing his plans for the trip, listing off all the touristy indulgences he intends to enjoy, completely oblivious to the fact that Lee, ever the dedicated police officer, has other plans in mind for their time together. Lee, it turns out, cannot simply take time off, even for his old friend's visit, because he is currently assigned to a sensitive and high-priority case. A bombing has recently occurred at the American Embassy in Hong Kong, an explosion that killed 2 United States Customs agents who had been stationed there working on a joint investigation. The bombing has become an international incident, drawing attention from both American and Hong Kong authorities, and Lee has been tasked with getting to the bottom of it. Rather than allowing Carter the vacation he was promised, Lee insists that Carter accompany him to the crime scene, much to Carter's visible frustration and disappointment. Carter grumbles and protests, reminding Lee that he is on vacation and has no jurisdiction or interest in Hong Kong police business, but Lee, calm and unbothered as always, simply tells him to come along anyway, setting the pattern for their dynamic throughout the film, in which Lee's sense of duty repeatedly derails Carter's plans for leisure and fun. At the site of the embassy bombing, the two men begin examining the wreckage, and it quickly becomes clear that this was no random act of terrorism, but a carefully planned and executed attack tied to something much larger. Lee's investigation uncovers evidence suggesting the bombing is connected to a counterfeiting operation, one sophisticated enough to produce fake American currency of remarkably high quality, currency good enough to potentially destabilize legitimate financial systems if it were to be distributed widely enough. As Lee digs through the evidence, piecing together fragments of information from the scene, Carter reluctantly finds himself drawn into the investigation despite his initial reluctance, his natural curiosity and instinct as a detective overriding his desire to simply enjoy his vacation. The trail from the bombing leads the two men toward a name that immediately changes the tone of the investigation for Lee: Ricky Tan. The mention of this name causes a visible shift in Lee's demeanor, a flicker of something deeper and more personal beneath his usually composed exterior, though he does not immediately explain to Carter why this particular name affects him so strongly. As the investigation continues, Carter and Lee's first major stop takes them to a lavish, high-end massage parlor, a business with connections to the criminal underworld that Lee believes may hold information related to the bombing and the counterfeiting operation. This sequence quickly becomes one of the most memorable and beloved set pieces in the entire film, blending elaborate choreography with laugh-out-loud comedy in a way that perfectly encapsulates what makes the Rush Hour franchise so enjoyable. Carter, ever eager to enjoy the perks of the establishment despite being there on police business, allows himself to get comfortable, indulging in the luxurious surroundings while Lee attempts to keep him focused on the investigation. Their presence attracts the attention of the parlor's security, and what begins as a simple information-gathering visit rapidly escalates into a full-blown brawl, with Lee dispatching one attacker after another with his trademark blend of acrobatic martial arts and clever use of everyday objects and surroundings as improvised weapons, while Carter, in a hilariously exaggerated fashion, attempts to fend off his own opponents using a combination of bravado, quick thinking, and no small amount of luck. The sequence culminates in the two men working together, playing off each other's strengths in a way that showcases just how far their partnership has evolved since the events of the first film, and by the end of it they emerge victorious, though not without collecting a few bumps and bruises along the way, and importantly, they walk away with a crucial piece of information that pushes the investigation forward. That piece of information leads them deeper into the underworld of Hong Kong's criminal elite, and it is here that the audience is properly introduced to Ricky Tan, the man whose name had so visibly unsettled Lee earlier in the film. Tan is revealed to be a powerful and feared figure in the Triad criminal organization, a man with a long and complicated history in Hong Kong's criminal underworld. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Tan's connection to Lee is deeply personal rather than purely professional. Years earlier, Tan had been a partner and close associate of Lee's father, who was also a police officer, and the circumstances surrounding Lee's father's death are revealed to be far more complicated and tragic than Lee had previously understood, with Tan's involvement casting a long shadow over Lee's entire life and career. This revelation adds significant emotional weight to what might otherwise have been a straightforward crime thriller, transforming Lee's pursuit of Tan from a simple matter of law enforcement into something far more personal, a quest for truth and closure regarding his father's legacy and the circumstances of his death that have haunted him for years. As Carter and Lee continue investigating the counterfeiting operation, they encounter Stephen Rain, a wealthy and outwardly respectable American businessman who has built a public image of legitimacy and success. Rain presents himself as a pillar of the business community, someone above suspicion, but as the investigation deepens, it becomes increasingly apparent that his polished exterior conceals a much darker reality. Rain, it turns out, is deeply involved in the counterfeiting scheme, using his legitimate business enterprises as cover for the massive criminal operation being run in partnership with Ricky Tan. Working alongside Rain is Lee, an elegant, dangerous, and highly skilled operative whose calm and composed demeanor masks a lethal capability for violence. Lee serves as one of the film's primary physical threats, a formidable martial artist whose fighting skills rival even those of Lee himself, and her presence in the story adds a layer of genuine danger to the proceedings, as she is clearly not someone to be underestimated, regardless of her calm and controlled exterior. The interplay between Rain's polished, calculated menace and Lee's physical capability creates a compelling antagonistic force that complements Ricky Tan's more personal and emotionally charged threat to Lee. As the investigation progresses, Carter and Lee's paths cross with Isabella Molina, a woman who initially appears to be simply another figure moving through the world of high-stakes criminal enterprise that they have found themselves navigating. Carter, true to his character, is immediately smitten with Isabella, and much of the film's comedic subplot revolves around his repeated, often clumsy attempts to win her affection, while simultaneously trying to remain focused on the increasingly dangerous investigation unfolding around them. As the story develops, it is revealed that Isabella is actually an undercover agent, working in secret to infiltrate the criminal organization from within, and her true loyalties become a significant point of tension and uncertainty as the plot progresses. Her introduction adds both a romantic element to Carter's storyline and an additional layer of intrigue to the broader narrative, as neither Carter, Lee, nor the audience can be entirely certain of her true motivations and allegiances until later in the film, when her role in the operation becomes fully clear. The investigation takes Carter and Lee through a series of increasingly tense and dangerous encounters as they get closer to understanding the full scope of the counterfeiting operation. One pivotal sequence takes place at a glamorous casino and nightclub, a location that serves as a front for much of Tan and Rain's illegal activity. Here, Carter and Lee attempt to gather more information while posing undercover, leading to a tense sequence filled with the kind of dramatic irony and comedic misdirection that the franchise has become known for, as Carter's attempts at subtlety repeatedly threaten to blow their cover, forcing Lee to improvise and adapt in order to keep their investigation from being discovered prematurely. The nightclub sequence also serves to further develop the relationship between Carter and Isabella, as their paths cross again in a setting charged with tension, danger, and unspoken attraction, deepening Carter's infatuation with her even as questions about her true role in the unfolding events continue to linger in the background. As Lee continues to press forward in his pursuit of the truth about his father's death and Ricky Tan's involvement in it, the emotional core of the film comes increasingly to the forefront. Through a series of confrontations and revelations, Lee learns more about the circumstances surrounding his father's death, discovering that Tan's betrayal ran far deeper than he had ever imagined. This personal history is woven carefully throughout the film's more comedic and action-oriented sequences, giving Jackie Chan's performance an added dimension of quiet grief and simmering resolve beneath his usual calm, controlled demeanor. These moments of emotional depth are handled with a surprising amount of restraint given the film's overall comedic tone, allowing the weight of Lee's personal history to land without ever completely derailing the film's fundamentally fun, fast-paced energy. Meanwhile, Carter's own storyline continues to develop in parallel, as his growing feelings for Isabella complicate his ability to remain objective and focused on the investigation. His natural instincts as a detective, combined with his genuine affection for her, create an internal conflict that plays out across several scenes, as he finds himself torn between his professional responsibilities and his personal desires, a conflict that mirrors, in a lighter and more comedic register, the deeper emotional struggle that Lee is experiencing regarding his father's legacy and his pursuit of Ricky Tan. This parallel structure, contrasting Carter's romantic entanglement with Lee's more weighty personal quest, helps balance the film's tonal shifts, ensuring that even as the story delves into darker, more emotionally resonant territory, it never loses sight of the buddy comedy dynamic that defines the franchise at its core. As the investigation into the counterfeiting operation deepens, Carter and Lee uncover evidence suggesting that the scope of the scheme is far larger than they initially believed, involving not just the production of counterfeit currency but an elaborate plan to distribute it on a massive scale, potentially causing significant economic disruption. This discovery raises the stakes considerably, transforming what began as an investigation into a single bombing into a race against time to prevent a scheme that could have far-reaching consequences. The urgency of the situation forces Carter and Lee to take increasingly bold risks in their pursuit of the truth, leading to several tense and dangerous confrontations with Tan's associates, each one escalating the physical and emotional stakes of the story. One of the film's major turning points comes when Carter and Lee's investigation leads them out of Hong Kong entirely, following the trail of the counterfeiting operation back to the United States, and eventually to Los Angeles, the city where their partnership first began in the original film. This shift in location allows the story to briefly return to more familiar territory for Carter, even as the danger surrounding the investigation continues to escalate. It is here that the true scale of the conspiracy involving Rain, Tan, and their network of associates becomes fully apparent, as evidence mounts pointing toward an even larger and more audacious scheme than Carter and Lee had initially suspected, one that will ultimately bring the story to its explosive climax. The narrative eventually shifts once more, this time to Las Vegas, where the counterfeiting operation's endgame is set to be executed inside one of the city's opulent casinos. This location serves as the perfect backdrop for the film's climactic sequence, combining the glamour and excess of Las Vegas with the high-stakes tension of the unfolding conspiracy. As Carter and Lee close in on the truth, they find themselves facing off against Tan's forces in a series of increasingly intense confrontations, culminating in a final showdown that brings together all of the film's major threads, personal, criminal, and romantic, into a single explosive climax. Ricky Tan, now cornered and increasingly desperate, is forced to confront Lee directly, and the long simmering tension between the two men, rooted in Tan's betrayal of Lee's father years earlier, finally reaches its breaking point. This confrontation is charged with genuine emotional weight, as Lee is finally given the opportunity to confront the man responsible for shattering his family and reckon with the truth about his father's death that has haunted him for so long. Alongside this deeply personal confrontation, Carter finds himself facing off against Lee in a fierce and physically demanding fight sequence that showcases both his own scrappy fighting style and Lee's superior technical skill, forcing Carter to rely on quick thinking, improvisation, and no small amount of luck to hold his own against an opponent who significantly outmatches him in terms of pure martial arts ability. Meanwhile, the true nature of Isabella's involvement in the operation is finally revealed in full, and her actions during this climactic sequence prove pivotal in determining the ultimate outcome of the confrontation, as her true loyalties, carefully concealed throughout much of the film, come to bear on the unfolding events in ways that significantly impact both the resolution of the criminal conspiracy and the future of her relationship with Carter. As the climactic battle reaches its peak, Stephen Rain's carefully constructed facade of legitimacy finally crumbles entirely, and the full extent of his involvement in the counterfeiting scheme is exposed for all to see. The combination of Lee's relentless pursuit of justice for his father, Carter's determination to see the investigation through despite the personal complications introduced by his feelings for Isabella, and the collective efforts of both men to dismantle Tan and Rain's criminal empire converges into a satisfying and cathartic resolution. The final confrontation is resolved through a combination of Lee's disciplined martial arts prowess, Carter's resourcefulness and quick improvisation, and the timely intervention of Isabella, whose true allegiances ultimately align with the side of justice, even if her methods and motivations remain ambiguous for much of the story leading up to this point. In the aftermath of the climactic confrontation, the various threads of the story are brought to a satisfying close. Ricky Tan's criminal empire is dismantled, and Lee finally achieves the closure he has been seeking regarding his father's death, allowing him to move forward with a sense of peace that had eluded him throughout the earlier parts of the film. Stephen Rain's elaborate counterfeiting scheme is exposed and dismantled, bringing an end to the threat that had driven the investigation from its opening moments at the site of the embassy bombing. Carter, for his part, is finally able to reconcile his professional responsibilities with his personal feelings for Isabella, and the resolution of her true role in the story allows for a conclusion to their romantic subplot that feels earned rather than rushed, given the careful way her character's true motivations were revealed throughout the film. Throughout this entire journey, from the streets of Hong Kong to the casinos of Las Vegas, the film never loses sight of the central relationship between Carter and Lee, which remains the true emotional and comedic anchor of the entire story. Their dynamic, built on genuine affection and mutual respect despite their vastly different personalities and approaches to police work, is tested and strengthened throughout the course of the investigation, as they navigate increasingly dangerous situations together, relying on each other's strengths to compensate for their individual weaknesses. Carter's brash confidence and quick wit repeatedly get the pair into and out of trouble in equal measure, while Lee's discipline, skill, and unwavering sense of justice provide the steady counterbalance that keeps their partnership functional even in the most chaotic circumstances. Their banter, filled with cultural misunderstandings, playful insults, and genuine moments of camaraderie, provides much of the film's comedic backbone, ensuring that even during the story's more tense or emotionally weighty sequences, the fundamental fun and lightheartedness that defines the franchise is never far from the surface. By the story's conclusion, both Carter and Lee have grown and changed in meaningful ways as a result of the events they have lived through together. Lee has finally confronted and made peace with a painful chapter of his family's history that had shaped so much of his life and career, while Carter has proven, despite his often chaotic and undisciplined approach to police work, that he possesses genuine loyalty, courage, and investigative instincts that go beyond his comedic exterior. The bond between the two men, already established in the first film, is deepened considerably through the trials they face together throughout the course of the story, setting the stage for their continued partnership beyond the events of this particular adventure. The film closes on a note that balances triumph with warmth, allowing audiences to feel the satisfaction of seeing justice served while also enjoying the genuine affection and humor that has defined the relationship between its two central characters from the very beginning. The story of Rush Hour 2, in its full scope, represents a rich blend of personal drama, high-stakes crime thriller elements, romantic subplot, and above all, the kind of buddy comedy chemistry that made audiences fall in love with Carter and Lee in the first place. Delivering a sequel that expands upon its predecessor in nearly every meaningful way while never losing sight of what made that original story so beloved to begin with. The complete life stories of the Rush Hour 2 cast. Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan, the man behind Inspector Lee, was born Chan Kong Sang on April 7, 1954, in Hong Kong, on the grounds of what was then the French consulate, where his parents worked as domestic staff. His mother reportedly gave him the nickname Pow Pow, meaning cannonball, because of how he used to tumble and roll around as a baby, an oddly fitting nickname for a boy who would grow up to make his living tumbling through the air on camera. His parents lived in poverty during his early childhood, and when Jackie was still very young, the family relocated briefly to Australia, where his father took work and the young boy spent a short period attending school in Canberra. He struggled academically and showed little interest in traditional schooling, so his parents made the difficult decision to send him back to Hong Kong to enroll at the China Drama Academy, a rigorous boarding school built around the traditions of Peking opera. From the age of 7 until he was 17, Jackie lived and trained at this school under an extremely demanding regimen that combined acrobatics, martial arts, singing, and dance, all taught with a level of strict discipline that included physical punishment for mistakes or poor performance. It was an environment that many children would have found unbearable, but it forged in Jackie an extraordinary physical capability and a tolerance for pain and hardship that would define his entire career. During his time there, he became part of a performing group known as the Seven Little Fortunes, and within that group he formed lifelong friendships and professional bonds with two other young performers, Sammo Hung and Yuan Biao, both of whom would go on to become major names in Hong Kong action cinema in their own right. Together, the three of them would later be informally referred to as a trio of brothers within the industry, having grown up together under the same brutal training regime. After leaving the opera school as a teenager, Jackie Chan struggled to find steady work as an actor, and he took whatever jobs he could get, including working as a stuntman on various Hong Kong film productions. It was during this period that he had brief, minor involvement in productions featuring Bruce Lee, appearing in small roles or as a stunt performer in films connected to the biggest martial arts star of the era. When Bruce Lee died unexpectedly in 1973, the Hong Kong film industry scrambled to find a successor who could fill the void he left behind, and for a time, studios attempted to market Jackie Chan and other young performers as the next Bruce Lee, complete with films bearing titles designed to evoke Lee's legacy. This approach did not suit Chan's natural talents or personality, and his early career in these imitation roles largely failed to catch on with audiences. It was not until Chan was given more creative control and allowed to develop his own distinct style, one that blended acrobatic martial arts with comedic timing and physical humor rather than the intense, serious tone associated with Bruce Lee, that his career truly began to take off. His breakthrough came with the 1978 film Drunken Master, a martial arts comedy that showcased his innovative fighting choreography combined with an irreverent, humorous sensibility that audiences had never quite seen before in the genre. This film helped establish the template that Chan would follow for the rest of his career, one built on stunt work so dangerous and elaborate that it bordered on reckless, all performed with a light-hearted, almost playful attitude that made the danger feel exhilarating rather than frightening. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Jackie Chan became one of the biggest stars in Asian cinema, headlining a string of hit films including multiple entries in the Police Story series and Drunken Master franchise, each one pushing the boundaries of what he was willing to risk physically for the sake of entertaining his audience. He suffered an enormous number of injuries over the course of his career, including a particularly severe incident during the filming of Armor of God, in which he fell more than 40 feet while attempting a jump between structures, fracturing his skull and requiring emergency surgery that nearly cost him his life. Despite injuries that would have ended most performers' careers, Chan continued to insist on performing his own stunts throughout the following decades, a commitment to authenticity that became central to his identity as a filmmaker and performer. His fame slowly began to spread beyond Asia during the 1990s, aided by a growing cult following among Western audiences who had discovered his films through imports and bootleg copies, as well as high-profile moments of recognition, such as being honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at a major American entertainment ceremony. His true breakthrough into mainstream Hollywood stardom came with the original Rush Hour in 1998, which paired him with Chris Tucker in a buddy cop comedy that introduced his particular blend of comedic action to a massive American audience for the first time. The film's enormous success led directly to Rush Hour 2 in 2001, which further cemented his status as a global superstar and gave American audiences an even deeper look at his acrobatic fighting style, now combined with the added texture of a story that returned him to his home turf of Hong Kong. Beyond his film career, Jackie Chan has pursued a career as a recording artist in Asia, released numerous albums over the decades, and became deeply involved in philanthropic work, founding a charitable foundation that supports causes including youth scholarships and disaster relief. His personal life has included a long marriage to actress Joan Lin, with whom he has a son, as well as a widely publicized relationship outside that marriage that resulted in a daughter, matters he later addressed openly in his own memoirs. In the years since Rush Hour 2, Chan has continued to work steadily, expanding into dramatic roles as well as continuing his action career, and in 2016 he was honored with an Academy Award recognizing his extraordinary contributions to cinema over the course of his career, a milestone recognition of a body of work built on decades of physical risk and creative innovation. Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker, who brought the fast-talking, high-energy detective James Carter to life, was born on August 31, 1971, in Atlanta, Georgia, and raised in the nearby city of Decatur as the youngest of 6 children in his family. His parents ran a janitorial service, and growing up in a large household, young Chris quickly discovered that humor was an effective way to stand out among his siblings and gain attention, a skill he would hone throughout his childhood and adolescence. He attended Columbia High School, where his natural comedic instincts were already apparent, entertaining classmates, and even teachers with his impressions and jokes, and it was reportedly one of his teachers who first encouraged him to showcase his talent in a school talent show, giving him an early taste of performing in front of an audience. Inspired heavily by comedy legends such as Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, both of whom shaped his sense of comedic timing and delivery, Tucker made the decision after high school to leave Georgia and move to Los Angeles to pursue a career in stand-up comedy, arriving in the city with little more than ambition and a willingness to sleep on a friend's floor while he tried to break into the entertainment industry. His early years in Los Angeles were a grind, performing at local clubs and open mic nights while trying to get noticed in an intensely competitive scene, but his persistence eventually paid off when he landed an opportunity to perform on the HBO stand-up showcase Def Comedy Jam in the early 1990s, a platform that helped introduce him to a wider audience and showcased his rapid-fire, high-pitched comedic delivery that would become his signature style. Tucker's film career began to take shape in the mid-1990s, starting with a role in House Party 3, followed by a string of increasingly prominent parts that built his reputation as a rising comedic talent. His breakout role came in 1995 with Friday, in which he played Smokey, a memorable, endlessly quotable character whose comedic energy helped make the film a cult classic that remains beloved decades later. That same year, he appeared in Dead Presidents, showing a willingness to take on more dramatic material alongside his comedic work. In 1997, Tucker had one of the busiest and most pivotal years of his career, appearing alongside Bruce Willis in the science fiction film The Fifth Element, where his portrayal of the eccentric radio host Ruby Rhode showcased his ability to bring outsized, flamboyant energy to a role, and also starring alongside Charlie Sheen in Money Talks, a film that marked his first collaboration with director Brett Ratner, a partnership that would prove enormously important just a year later. In 1998, Tucker was cast alongside Jackie Chan in Rush Hour, playing LAPD detective James Carter opposite Chan's Hong Kong inspector, and the film became a massive commercial success, largely on the strength of the comedic chemistry between its two very different leading men. The success of the first film gave Tucker significant negotiating leverage for the sequel, and he reportedly held out for a substantial salary increase before agreeing to return for Rush Hour 2 in 2001, a testament to how quickly his star had risen following the original film's success. The Rush Hour franchise, which eventually expanded to include a third installment in 2007, went on to gross hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide and established Tucker and Chan as one of the most beloved comedic duos in modern Hollywood history, with the pairing even being recognized with awards specifically honoring their on-screen chemistry. Following the completion of the Rush Hour trilogy, Tucker became known for being notably selective about the roles he took on, appearing in far fewer projects than many of his contemporaries and instead focusing much of his energy on stand-up comedy touring, where he continued to build a reputation as one of the most dynamic live performers in the business. His comedic sensibility was rooted in a family-friendly approach that avoided excessive profanity or explicit content, which helped him stand out among his peers in the world of stand-up and made him accessible to a broader range of audiences. In 2012, Tucker surprised many by taking on a dramatic supporting role in Silver Linings Playbook, a performance that demonstrated a range beyond his comedic reputation and earned him critical praise for showing genuine depth as an actor. He continued to take on occasional film roles in the years that followed, including a notable appearance in the 2023 film Air, which told the story behind the origins of the Air Jordan sneaker line, further proving his ability to blend into dramatic ensemble casts. Throughout his career, Tucker has also maintained a close friendship with pop icon Michael Jackson, a relationship that has been documented and discussed in various retrospectives of both men's lives. Despite periods of relative quiet in his film output over the years, Tucker's status as one of the defining comedic voices of his generation remains firmly intact, built on a foundation of unforgettable performances that began with his explosive energy in Friday and reached global heights through his unforgettable partnership with Jackie Chan in the Rush Hour films. John Lone. John Lone, who portrayed the film's central antagonist Ricky Tan, was born in Quoc Liang on October 13, 1952, in British-controlled Hong Kong, into circumstances that were considerably more difficult than those of many of his future co-stars. Raised by a single mother for the first several years of his life, he was separated from her around the age of 7 and placed into the demanding world of Peking opera training at Hong Kong's Tsinghua Academy, a school known for its grueling discipline and rigorous instruction in classical Chinese theater, dance, singing, and movement. According to accounts of his early life, he never saw his mother again after being sent away for training, a detail that speaks to the harshness of the circumstances that shaped his early years. Despite the difficulty of this upbringing, the training gave him an extraordinary foundation in performance that would later serve him well as an actor. In his late teens, Lone left Hong Kong for the United States, where he continued his education, eventually attending Santa Ana Community College in California and later studying at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in both Pasadena and New York, formal training that helped him transition from his opera background into Western-style dramatic acting. It was during his time in California that he met and married Nina Savino, an Asian-American woman studying drama and art, in 1972, though the marriage would end in divorce by 1979. Lone's stage name itself carries meaning tied to his heritage, as he has explained that the variants of his adopted surname relate to the concept of the dragon across different Chinese dialects, reflecting his intention to draw on that symbolic power throughout his life and career. After settling into the American theater scene, Lone became part of the East West Players, a pioneering Asian-American theater company based in Los Angeles, where he worked alongside other notable performers who were similarly navigating an industry that offered limited opportunities for Asian actors at the time. His dedication to his craft during this period was intense, as he worked not only as a performer but also as a dancer, singer, writer, and director, absorbing every aspect of theatrical production. His talent was eventually recognized by playwright David Henry Hwang, who wrote a production specifically tailored to Lone's abilities, allowing him to star in, direct, choreograph, and even score the piece, an experience that helped establish him as a serious force in American theater and earned him significant industry recognition, including an Obie Award for his work. Loan's transition to film brought him some of his most celebrated roles. He appeared in a supporting capacity in the Dino De Laurentiis remake of King Kong before landing a major breakthrough with his nearly wordless, physically demanding performance in the 1984 film Iceman, in which he played a prehistoric man revived in the modern era. This performance caught the attention of major Hollywood directors and led to further prominent roles, including his portrayal of a ruthless crime boss in Michael Cimino's Year of the Dragon in 1985, a performance that earned him a Golden Globe nomination and allowed audiences to see his natural, striking screen presence without the heavy makeup that had defined his earlier roles. His most acclaimed performance came in 1987, when director Bernardo Bertolucci cast him as Emperor Puyi, the last emperor of China, in the sweeping historical epic The Last Emperor, a film that went on to win multiple Academy Awards and brought Loan significant international recognition, including another Golden Globe nomination for his performance. He continued to take on complex, often unconventional roles throughout the following years, including his portrayal of a Chinese opera performer specializing in female roles in the 1993 film M. Butterfly, a performance that further demonstrated his range and willingness to take on challenging material. Loan's approach to his career was notably selective, choosing to work in smaller independent and foreign productions rather than pursuing high-volume commercial Hollywood work, a pattern that continued even as opportunities in mainstream cinema increased. His role as Ricky Tan in Rush Hour 2 in 2001 marked one of his more prominent English-language film appearances during this later period of his career, bringing his talents to a much wider mainstream audience than many of his earlier, more art house-oriented projects had reached. In addition to his acting work, Loan directed an acclaimed documentary focused on the history of Chinese railroad workers in America, which aired on public television, reflecting his ongoing interest in exploring and honoring aspects of Chinese and Chinese-American history and identity. He also pursued a singing career in Asia and developed his own lines of cosmetics and apparel, demonstrating a broad range of creative and entrepreneurial interests beyond acting. In the years following Rush Hour 2, Loan continued to divide his time between the United States, China, and Canada, taking on occasional film roles while remaining an intensely private individual about the details of his personal life, eventually stepping back from acting after his final film role in 2007. Zhang Zi. Zhang Zi, who portrayed the formidable Hu Li in Rush Hour 2, was born on February 9, 1979, in Beijing, China, to a father who worked as an economist and a mother who worked as a kindergarten teacher, growing up in a modest household during a period before China's major economic expansion had fully taken hold. She has an older brother, and by her own account, her family's financial circumstances were quite limited during her childhood, though she has spoken about appreciating the perspective that upbringing gave her later in life. As a young child, Zhang was notably small and physically frail, and her parents, concerned about her health, encouraged her to begin studying dance as a way of building strength and discipline, despite the fact that she did not initially have any strong desire to become a professional dancer. She began her dance training at the age of 8, focusing on traditional Chinese folk dance, and by the age of 11, her talent was significant enough that she was accepted into a specialized boarding school affiliated with the prestigious Beijing Dance Academy, where she received rigorous, elite-level training that would shape her physical discipline for the rest of her career. At 15, she won a National Youth Dance Championship, a significant achievement that brought her to the attention of the entertainment industry and led to opportunities appearing in television commercials, marking her first steps into a career beyond dance alone. Following her success in dance, Zhang made the decision to pursue acting more formally, enrolling at the Central Academy of Drama in Beijing, widely regarded as the most prestigious acting school in China. While still a student, she was cast in her breakthrough role in the 1999 film The Road Home, directed by acclaimed filmmaker Zhang Yimou, a performance that immediately established her as a rising talent in Chinese cinema. Her career reached an entirely new level of international prominence the following year, in 2000, when she was cast in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, directed by Ang Lee, a martial arts epic that became a massive critical and commercial success around the world, ultimately winning multiple Academy Awards and becoming one of the highest-grossing foreign-language films ever released in the United States. Her performance in the film, which required extensive physical training in martial arts choreography, earned her widespread international recognition and several awards, including honors from critics' associations in North America, and effectively launched her as a globally recognized star. In 2001, riding the momentum of that international breakthrough, Zhang made her first American film appearance in Rush Hour 2, playing the dangerous and highly skilled Huli opposite Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, a role that further showcased her genuine martial arts ability to Western audiences and expanded her visibility in the American market. That same year, she also appeared in other significant Chinese-language productions, continuing to build a substantial body of work across multiple markets simultaneously. In the years following Rush Hour 2, Zhang continued to take on major roles in acclaimed films, including Zhang Yimou's Hero in 2002 and House of Flying Daggers in 2004, both of which further solidified her reputation as one of the leading actresses in Chinese cinema and a significant crossover star recognized internationally. In 2005, she starred in the Hollywood production Memoirs of a Geisha, a role that generated considerable attention and further cemented her status as one of the most recognizable Asian actresses working in American cinema at the time. Her career continued to expand across the following decade, encompassing both Chinese and international productions, including a notable role in 2013's The Grandmaster, directed by Wong Kar-wai, a performance that many critics and fans consider among the finest of her career. Beyond her acting work, Zhang has been recognized for her contributions to fashion and beauty campaigns, appearing in high-profile advertising for major global brands, and in 2006 she was invited to serve as a jury member at the Cannes Film Festival, a significant honor within the international film community. She achieved permanent residency status in Hong Kong through a skilled migrant program in 2007, reflecting her deepening ties to the broader Chinese entertainment industry beyond mainland China alone. In her personal life, Zhang married Chinese rock musician Wang Feng in March 2015, and the couple welcomed a daughter later that same year. Throughout her career, Zhang has remained one of the most bankable and internationally recognized actresses to emerge from China, with a body of work that spans martial arts epics, historical dramas, and international crossover productions, a career trajectory that had one of its earliest and most significant American showcases in her breakout performance in Rush Hour 2. Alan King. Alan King, who played the wealthy and corrupt businessman Stephen Rain, was born Erwin Allen Nyberg on December 26, 1927, in New York City, the youngest of several children born to Russian Jewish immigrant parents, Bernard and Minnie Nyberg, in a working-class household on Manhattan's Lower East Side. His father worked as a handbag cutter, and the family's modest financial circumstances meant that young Alan began earning money from a very early age, performing impersonations on street corners for spare change by the time he was around 8 years old. He showed an early aptitude for making people laugh, participating in school plays throughout his childhood, and at the age of 14 he became a runner-up in a nationwide amateur talent radio contest, an experience that gave him his first taste of performing for a wider audience and helped set him on the path toward a career in entertainment. King made the decision to drop out of high school at around age 15 in order to pursue comedy full-time, taking a job as a stand-up performer at a Catskills resort hotel that was part of the famous Borscht Belt circuit of Jewish vacation resorts, a training ground for countless comedians of his generation. His time there was short-lived after he made a joke poking fun at the hotel's ownership during a performance, and was promptly fired, But rather than derailing his ambitions, the setback simply pushed him toward other opportunities within the same circuit of resorts and clubs. He spent a period of his early career working in Canada, where he performed in burlesque houses and, notably, also took up boxing professionally for a time, finding some success in the ring before eventually deciding to leave that pursuit behind after his first loss. It was during this boxing period that he adopted the surname King, reportedly taking it from an opponent he had defeated, a colorful origin story for the stage name that would define the rest of his career. Returning to New York, King built his reputation through the club circuit, initially relying on one-liner jokes centered around familiar comedic subjects such as mothers-in-law and Jewish cultural life. His comedic approach underwent a significant transformation after he observed fellow comedian Danny Thomas performing in the early 1950s, noticing that Thomas achieved a stronger connection with his audience by speaking directly to them in a conversational manner rather than simply delivering jokes at them. Inspired by this realization, King reshaped his own style into a more observational, conversational form of comedy that drew heavily on everyday experiences, particularly the frustrations and absurdities of suburban American life, a shift that would come to define his signature comedic voice for the rest of his career. This approach to comedy proved enormously influential, and later comedians, including some of the biggest names in the business, have cited King's conversational, observational style as an important influence on the development of modern stand-up comedy. King's rise to national prominence was significantly boosted by numerous appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show throughout the 1950s and 1960s, where he became a familiar and beloved presence for television audiences across the country, ultimately appearing on the program dozens of times over the years. He also became a frequent guest host of The Tonight Show and, in 1972, was given the honor of hosting the Academy Awards ceremony, a significant marker of his standing within the entertainment industry at that point in his career. Beyond his television work, King performed as an opening act for some of the biggest names in entertainment, including Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland, and became a popular headline performer in his own right at major venues in Las Vegas, including the famous Caesar's Palace. As his career progressed, King increasingly transitioned into serious acting roles in addition to his ongoing comedy work, appearing in a range of film and television productions that showcased a more dramatic side to his talents. He continued to work steadily as a character actor well into his later years, appearing in a notable supporting role in Martin Scorsese's 1995 film Casino, a dramatic crime film that demonstrated his ability to hold his own in serious, weighty material. His role as Stephen Rain in Rush Hour 2 in 2001 came during this later phase of his career, when he had become well established as a respected character actor capable of bringing gravity to supporting roles. Beyond his entertainment career, King was deeply committed to philanthropic causes throughout his life, founding a diagnostic medical center in Jerusalem, establishing a scholarship fund supporting American students at Hebrew University, and creating an endowed chair in dramatic arts at Brandeis University. He also played an important role in advocating for the rights of fellow comedians, and was involved in the founding of organizations supporting the comedy profession. King married Jeanette Sprung in 1947, and the couple had 3 children together, eventually settling in Great Neck, Long Island, where King lived for the remainder of his life, drawing much of his suburban-focused comedic material from his own experiences raising a family outside the city. He continued working steadily across film, television, and live performance until his death from lung cancer on May 9, 2004, at the age of 76, closing out a career that had spanned more than 6 decades and helped shape the trajectory of American stand-up comedy for generations of performers who followed him. Rosalind Sanchez. Rosalind Sanchez, who played the undercover agent Isabella Molina, was born Rosalind Milagros Sanchez Rodriguez on April 2, 1973, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the youngest of 4 children in her family, with 3 older brothers, raised by her father Efren, a businessman, and her mother Olga, a homemaker. From a very young age, Rosalind displayed a strong natural inclination toward performance, frequently entertaining her family with impromptu singing, dancing, and acting, showing an early passion for the arts that would eventually shape her entire career path. She attended school in San Juan, developing her interest in dance and performance throughout her childhood and adolescence, and after finishing her primary education, she enrolled at the University of Puerto Rico with the intention of studying marketing, following a more conventional academic and professional path similar to that pursued by her older brothers. However, her passion for performing ultimately proved stronger than her interest in a traditional business career, and she left the university after 3 years to pursue acting and dance full-time, a decision that marked a significant turning point in shaping the direction of her life. Sanchez's early career took shape in Puerto Rico, where at the age of 18 she began co-hosting a popular variety show called Que Vacilan, gaining valuable experience and exposure as a performer, dancer, and choreographer on the program. Her natural charisma and beauty also brought her recognition in pageant competitions, and in 1993 she won the title of Miss Puerto Rico Petite, followed by the international title of Miss American Petite the following year in 1994, achievements that helped raise her profile beyond Puerto Rico's borders and brought her international attention for the first time. In 1991, seeking to further pursue her artistic ambitions, she relocated to New York City, where she began taking classes in dance, acting, and singing to refine her craft and prepare herself for a broader entertainment career. Her first film role came in 1992, when she was cast in a small part in the adventure comedy Captain Ron, a film that was partially shot in Puerto Rico, giving her an early taste of working on an American film production. She continued building her acting resume through the 1990s, landing a recurring role as Pilar Domingo on the long-running CBS soap opera As the World Turns between 1996 and 1997, an experience that provided her with valuable on-camera training and helped establish her presence within the American television industry. Sanchez's breakthrough into major film roles came in 2001, when she was cast as Isabella Molina, the undercover customs agent in Rush Hour 2, appearing alongside Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in what would become one of the biggest box office hits of that year. The role showcased her ability to combine glamour with physical toughness, playing a law enforcement figure who could hold her own in a story built around action and intrigue, and she would go on to reprise elements of that same energetic, action-capable persona in Rush Hour 3 several years later. Following her success in Rush Hour 2, Sanchez continued building her film career with roles in productions such as Boat Trip in 2002, alongside Cuba Gooding Jr. and Horatio Sanz, and later The Game Plan in 2007, working alongside Dwayne Johnson. In 2005, Sanchez achieved a significant career milestone when she joined the cast of the CBS procedural drama Without a Trace, playing FBI agent Elena Delgado, a series regular role that ran from 2005 to 2009 and gave her sustained mainstream television exposure over several years, allowing American audiences to see her in a dramatic, ongoing capacity beyond her earlier film work. This role significantly expanded her visibility and cemented her reputation as a reliable and versatile performer capable of carrying a major role on a hit network drama. Beyond her acting career, Sanchez also pursued music, releasing a debut album titled Borinquena in 2003, drawing on her Puerto Rican heritage and showcasing her talents as a singer-songwriter in addition to her work as an actress, and she later appeared in music videos for other artists as well. In 2006, she took her creative ambitions a step further by producing and starring in the film Yellow, a passion project she had conceived years earlier that told a story loosely inspired by her own journey from Puerto Rico to New York City in pursuit of an entertainment career, allowing her to bring a deeply personal narrative to the screen under her own creative control. In the years following her run on Without a Trace, Sanchez continued to build a diverse career across television and film, taking on the role of Carmen Luna in the Lifetime dramedy Devious Maids, which ran from 2013 to 2016 and further showcased her comedic and dramatic range in an ensemble setting alongside a cast of prominent Latina actresses. She continued to take on new projects in the years that followed, including a starring and executive producing role as Elena Rourke in the 2021 reboot of the classic series Fantasy Island, and a role as Gigi Mendoza on the ABC drama Grand Hotel, demonstrating her continued relevance and adaptability within the television industry across multiple decades of her career. Beyond her professional work, Sanchez has remained active in philanthropic causes, including advocacy for animal rights through her involvement with PETA and support for organizations assisting children from families facing financial hardship. In her personal life, she married actor Eric Winter in November 2008 in a ceremony held in her native San Juan, and the couple went on to have 2 children together, a daughter born in 2012 and a son born in 2017. From her early days as a pageant winner and variety show host in Puerto Rico to her breakout role in Rush Hour 2 and her sustained success across film, television, and music, Rosalind Sanchez has built a multifaceted career that reflects both her artistic versatility and her deep connection to her Puerto Rican roots. Remaining one of the most recognizable Latina performers to emerge from the entertainment industry of the early 2000s. Harris Yulin. Harris Yulin, who appeared in Rush Hour 2 as United States Customs Agent Sterling, was born Harris Bart Goldberg on November 5, 1937, in Los Angeles, California, and was raised in a Jewish household in the city. Unlike many of his fellow cast members, Yulin's path into acting was not one that began in childhood performance but rather developed somewhat later, following a period of extensive travel throughout Europe and Israel during his younger years, experiences that broadened his worldview before he ultimately settled on pursuing a career in acting. He attended the University of California, Los Angeles, where he studied acting under the guidance of Jeff Corey, a highly respected acting teacher whose students over the years included numerous performers who would go on to significant careers in film and television. Yulin spent time living and working in Europe and Israel during this period as well, including work dubbing films, an experience that further exposed him to different aspects of the entertainment industry and helped shape his broader artistic sensibility before he committed fully to acting as a profession. Yulin's professional acting career began in earnest in New York, where he made his off-Broadway debut in 1963 in a production of Next Time I'll Sing for You, marking the start of what would become an extraordinarily long and prolific career built substantially on a foundation of serious stage work. He quickly established himself as a formidable interpreter of classical theater, particularly the works of William Shakespeare, taking on demanding roles in productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Richard III, and King John during the mid-1960s. His skill in classical work culminated in a widely praised performance as Hamlet in 1974, and he later returned to Shakespearean tragedy in 1986, playing Claudius opposite Kevin Kline's performance in the title role of Hamlet, a production that further reinforced his standing as a serious and respected classical stage actor. Yulin did not make his Broadway debut until 1980, appearing in a production of Watch on the Rhine, relatively late in his career by the standards of many actors, a reflection of the fact that much of his most significant early work took place off-Broadway and in regional and international theater rather than on the most commercially visible New York stages. Yulin's transition into film work began with a 1970 appearance in the comedy-drama End of the Road, and the following year he took on one of his more notable early film roles, portraying the legendary lawman Wyatt Earp in the Western film Doc, a performance that helped establish his presence in American cinema. Over the following decades, Yulin built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors, frequently cast in roles that required him to project authority, menace, or moral ambiguity, often playing corrupt officials, hardened lawmen, or intellectually formidable antagonists. Among his most memorable film roles was his portrayal of a corrupt police officer in Brian De Palma's 1983 crime epic Scarface, starring opposite Al Pacino, a performance that remains one of the most frequently cited highlights of his screen career. He continued building an impressive filmography throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, appearing as a stern judge in the 1989 comedy Ghostbusters 2, taking on a role in the 1994 thriller Clear and Present Danger, and appearing in Al Pacino's 1996 film Looking for Richard. His role as United States Customs Agent Sterling in Rush Hour 2 in 2001 came during a particularly active period for him professionally, as that same year he also appeared in the acclaimed crime drama Training Day alongside Denzel Washington, demonstrating the breadth and consistency of his work across genres during this stretch of his career. Beyond his film work, Yulin remained a constant presence on American television for decades, taking on guest and recurring roles across an enormous range of popular series, including appearances on Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Law and Order, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and 24. He received a Primetime Emmy Award nomination in 1996 for a guest role on the sitcom Frasier, recognition that highlighted his versatility in comedic as well as dramatic material despite his reputation being built largely around serious, weighty characters. In his personal life, Yulin was romantically linked to actress Faye Dunaway in the early 1970s before marrying actress Gwen Wells in 1975, a marriage that lasted until her death from cancer in 1993 at the age of 42, a loss that was later documented in a film that premiered at a major international film festival. He remarried in 2005 to actress Kristen Lohman, a marriage that lasted for the remainder of his life. Yulin continued working steadily well into his 80s, taking on notable later career roles including a recurring part in the acclaimed series Ozark, further proof of his enduring relevance and respect within the industry even after more than 5 decades of continuous work. He passed away on June 10, 2025, in New York City at the age of 87, closing out a remarkable career that spanned more than 100 film and television credits alongside an extensive and celebrated body of stage work, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most dependable and respected character actors of his generation. Overview of the production and its financial journey. When New Line Cinema greenlit Rush Hour 2 in the year 2000, the studio was making a calculated bet on lightning striking twice. The original Rush Hour, released in 1998, had been made for a comparatively modest sum of around $33 million and had gone on to earn well over $200 million worldwide, a return that turned Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker into one of the most bankable comedic duos in the industry almost overnight. Given that kind of return on investment, the studio was more than willing to significantly increase the budget for the sequel, and Rush Hour 2 ultimately carried a production budget of approximately $90 million, nearly triple what the first film had cost to make. This substantial increase reflected a number of factors that came together at once. The success of the original film gave both of its stars, and particularly Chris Tucker, enormous leverage in salary negotiations, and reports from the time indicate that Tucker held out for and secured a salary in the neighborhood of $20 million for his return as Detective James Carter. A dramatic jump from what he had been paid for the first installment, and a clear signal of how much his star power had risen in just a few short years. Jackie Chan, already one of the most bankable action stars on the planet by that point thanks to decades of success in Hong Kong's cinema combined with his newly cemented American crossover appeal, also commanded a considerably higher salary for the sequel than he had for the original. Beyond the two leads, the expanded budget needed to account for a much more ambitious physical production than the first film had required. Where Rush Hour largely confined its action to the streets of Los Angeles, the sequel demanded elaborate location shooting in Hong Kong, additional sequences shot back in Los Angeles, and a climactic act built around a lavish, purpose-built casino set constructed in Las Vegas, all of which multiplied the logistical costs of production considerably compared to a film that could largely stay rooted in a single city. The financial gamble paid off in spectacular fashion. Rush Hour 2 opened in North American theaters on August 3, 2001, and posted an opening weekend gross of over $67 million from just over 3,000 theaters, a number that, at the time, represented the largest opening weekend ever recorded for a film released in the month of August, a record the film held for several years before it was eventually surpassed. The film's momentum did not slow significantly in the weeks that followed, and it held on to the top spot at the North American box office for 3 consecutive weekends, an impressive feat that demonstrated just how strong word of mouth and audience appetite were for the sequel. By the time its theatrical run concluded, Rush Hour 2 had earned over $226 million in North America alone, and when combined with its international box office performance, the film's worldwide total came in at approximately $347 million. Against a $90 million budget, this made Rush Hour 2 an enormous financial success for New Line Cinema, comfortably surpassing the performance of the original film in absolute terms even if, when adjusted for factors like inflation and overall box office trends of the era, some analysts later noted the sequel's opening weekend attendance was somewhat lower on a per-ticket basis than the first film's had been. Regardless of those more granular comparisons, the raw numbers made Rush Hour 2 one of the biggest hits of 2001 and solidified the Rush Hour name as one of the most valuable action comedy franchises in Hollywood at the turn of the millennium, paving the way directly for a third installment, Rush Hour 3, which arrived several years later in 2007 with an even larger budget. Though that eventual sequel would not match the extraordinary box office heights achieved by Rush Hour 2. The challenge of filming across 2 continents. One of the defining characteristics of the Rush Hour 2 production was its genuinely international scope, a significant departure from the more contained, single-city production of the original film. Getting the cast and crew to Hong Kong for extended location shooting required an enormous amount of logistical coordination, particularly given that the production needed to capture the authentic energy, architecture, and street life of the city in a way that would feel immersive and real to audiences rather than like a studio approximation. Filming in a bustling international city presented its own unique set of production challenges that a Hollywood crew accustomed to working primarily in the United States had to adapt to on the fly, from navigating language barriers with local crew members and extras, to coordinating street closures and public safety arrangements in some of Hong Kong's busiest districts, to managing the sheer logistical complexity of transporting equipment, costumes, and production materials across international borders. Jackie Chan's deep roots in the Hong Kong film industry proved to be an enormous asset throughout this process, as his decades of experience working within that specific filmmaking ecosystem, along with his extensive personal relationships with local crews, stunt teams, and production companies, helped smooth over many of the challenges that might have otherwise slowed down or complicated the shoot considerably. Chan's involvement went well beyond simply acting in front of the camera, as his input on the action choreography and his familiarity with what worked visually and physically for Hong Kong-style action sequences directly shaped how many of the film's biggest set pieces were conceived and executed. The production's return to Los Angeles for portions of the film brought its own logistical shift, requiring the cast and crew to essentially reset and adapt to a completely different filming environment and production culture after weeks of working within the Hong Kong system. This kind of back and forth between production environments, each with its own rhythms, regulations, and ways of doing things, added a layer of complexity to the overall shooting schedule that the filmmakers had to carefully plan around in order to keep the production on schedule and within budget. The film's climactic sequences, set inside a glamorous fictional casino, were ultimately filmed in Las Vegas, with much of the pivotal casino action shot at the historic Desert Inn, a legendary Las Vegas property that has since been demolished and redeveloped, meaning that Rush Hour 2 inadvertently preserved on film a piece of Las Vegas history that no longer physically exists today. Shooting inside an operating or recently closed casino environment presented its own unique production demands, particularly for the elaborate action sequences that needed to unfold across the casino floor, and the production had to carefully coordinate with the property to stage everything from stunt work to the film's explosive climactic set piece without causing damage to what was, at the time, still a functioning piece of Las Vegas real estate. The counterfeit money scandal that actually happened during filming. Without question, one of the most remarkable and widely discussed behind-the-scenes stories connected to Rush Hour 2 involves an incident that reads almost like a plot twist from the film itself, given that the movie's entire storyline revolves around a massive counterfeiting operation. In order to realistically depict the enormous cache of fake currency at the center of the film's plot, the production commissioned a prop company called Independent Studio Services, often referred to by its acronym ISS, to manufacture what amounted to an almost unbelievable quantity of prop $100 bills, with estimates suggesting the company produced somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion in face value of fake currency for use in the film. The company, under the direction of its president, worked to make this prop money look as visually convincing as possible for the camera, incorporating printing techniques and design details that closely mimic the appearance of genuine American currency, right down to replicating many of the security features found on real bills, albeit with certain intentional differences worked in, including a small but telling alteration to the famous phrase found on real currency, which was subtly changed on the prop bills to read something different rather than the genuine wording found on actual American money. The trouble began during the filming of the film's climactic casino explosion sequence, shot on location at the Desert Inn in Las Vegas in late 2000. The scene called for hundreds of thousands of these fake bills to be sent flying through the air as part of a dramatic explosion sequence, and after an extended, multi-day effort to capture the shot properly, the production successfully got the footage they needed. However, in the aftermath of filming, it became clear that a significant amount of the prop money used in the scene had not made its way back into the production's possession. Extras working on the film, along with various bystanders and passers-by who had been in the vicinity of the shoot, ended up picking up substantial quantities of the fake bills that had been scattered around during the explosive sequence, and in a turn of events that could scarcely have been better scripted, a number of these individuals then attempted to use the prop money as if it were genuine currency, spending it at businesses along the Las Vegas Strip and reportedly in other cities as well, including Los Angeles and Minneapolis, as people carried their newfound cash away from the production and out into the wider world. Because the prop bills had been manufactured to look so convincingly realistic, the attempts to pass them off as real money were, in a number of instances, initially successful, which naturally set off alarm bells once local businesses and eventually federal authorities began to notice. The situation escalated quickly once the United States Secret Service, the federal agency responsible for investigating counterfeiting cases in America, became involved. Agents descended on the situation and ultimately seized more than $100 million in face value of the prop currency, treating the matter with the same seriousness they would apply to any genuine counterfeiting operation, given that the bills in circulation were realistic enough to have already fooled real people in real transactions. The prop company responsible for manufacturing the bills found itself on the receiving end of a cease and desist order from federal authorities, effectively halting their production of prop currency altogether in the aftermath of the incident. And agents went so far as to confiscate the company's digital printing files and existing currency inventory as part of the broader effort to ensure no further prop bills from this batch could continue circulating or being used on other productions around the world. Under federal law, specifically under regulations established through the Counterfeit Detection Act, prop currency intended for film and television use is required to meet certain size specifications relative to real currency, generally needing to be either significantly smaller or significantly larger than actual bills in order to prevent exactly this kind of confusion. And the investigation into the Rush Hour 2 incident became something of a notable case study in the entertainment industry, regarding just how carefully prop money needs to be designed and controlled in order to avoid running afoul of federal counterfeiting laws. The bizarre irony of a film about a massive counterfeit money scheme accidentally triggering a real federal counterfeiting investigation during its own production has made this story one of the most frequently retold pieces of Rush Hour 2 trivia in the years since, a genuinely stranger-than-fiction anecdote that speaks to just how immersive and realistic the filmmakers wanted their central plot device to appear on screen. The communication gap between its two stars. Long before Rush Hour 2 went into production, one of the central dynamics that had made the original Rush Hour so successful was the contrast between Jackie Chan's more reserved, disciplined screen presence and Chris Tucker's rapid-fire, high-energy comedic delivery. What audiences may not have fully appreciated at the time, however, was just how genuine that contrast actually was behind the scenes, rooted in a real language and communication gap between the two stars that persisted into the production of the sequel. Jackie Chan has since spoken candidly in various interviews about just how difficult it was for him, particularly during the production of the original film and continuing to some degree into the sequel, to keep pace with Chris Tucker's extremely fast, colloquial American English delivery. Chan has explained that he often had little idea what Tucker was actually saying to him in the moment during their scenes together, relying heavily on a dialogue coach positioned just behind the camera who would help him understand what had just been said so that he could react appropriately and deliver his own lines in response. Because Tucker's improvisational, rapid-fire comedic style meant that his delivery could vary significantly from take to take, Chan has noted that essentially every single shot presented a slightly different challenge for him in terms of comprehension, requiring him to stay constantly alert and adaptable throughout the shooting of their scenes together. This behind-the-scenes reality adds a layer of genuine authenticity to some of the film's most memorable comedic exchanges, particularly those built around the running joke of Carter's exasperation with Lee's occasional confusion or mishearing of American slang and idioms, since Chan was, to a real extent, actually experiencing a version of that same disorientation while filming. This dynamic reportedly extended into the more light-hearted moments captured on set outside of formal takes as well. According to numerous accounts and interviews given over the years by both stars, Chris Tucker developed something of a habit of playfully needling Jackie Chan throughout the production, teasing him in ways that became a running source of amusement for the rest of the cast and crew present on set. One frequently cited example of this dynamic involves footage captured for the film's blooper reel, which was famously included as part of the closing credits sequence in keeping with a tradition Jackie Chan had established in many of his earlier Hong Kong films, showing outtakes and mistakes from the shoot set to music as the credits rolled. In several of these bloopers, Tucker can be heard repeatedly and seemingly deliberately referring to Chan's character by the actor's own real name rather than his character's name of Lee, playfully blurring the line between actor and character in a way that clearly amused everyone on set, including Chan himself, who took the good-natured ribbing in stride as part of the genuine friendship and easy chemistry that had developed between the two men since their first film together. The story behind Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker's first meeting. While this particular story technically originates from the production of the first Rush Hour film rather than the sequel itself, it remains such a frequently referenced piece of the duo's origin story that it continues to circulate widely whenever discussions of their on-screen partnership come up, including in the lead-up to and promotion of Rush Hour 2. According to accounts shared by Chris Tucker himself in various interviews over the years, his very first meeting with Jackie Chan, arranged before filming began on the original film, did not go quite the way he had anticipated. Tucker has recalled that during this initial meeting, which was largely centered around discussing the film and getting the two future co-stars comfortable with one another ahead of shooting, Jackie Chan remained almost entirely silent throughout the conversation, simply nodding along without offering much in the way of verbal participation. Given that the entire premise of the film hinged on a comedic verbal dynamic between the two characters, Tucker found this silence deeply unsettling, and he has described pulling the director aside immediately after the meeting concluded to voice his concern, reportedly asking with genuine alarm whether Chan actually spoke English at all. and expressing serious doubt about whether the film could even work if the two of them weren't able to communicate and play off one another effectively during their scenes. As it turned out, Chan's quiet demeanor during that initial meeting was less about a language barrier and more about his general tendency to observe and absorb a new situation carefully before engaging more actively, a personality trait that some who have worked with him over the years have noted is fairly characteristic of his more measured, thoughtful approach both on set and in unfamiliar professional settings. This early moment of uncertainty between the two men makes their eventual on-screen chemistry, which became one of the defining elements of both Rush Hour films, all the more remarkable in hindsight, given how tentative and uncertain their working relationship appeared to be before filming had even properly begun. Brett Ratner's approach to directing and shaping the comedy. Director Brett Ratner, who had previously worked with Chris Tucker on the 1997 film Money Talks before pairing him with Jackie Chan on the original Rush Hour, brought a specific directorial sensibility to the sequel that placed significant emphasis on maximizing the natural comedic chemistry between his two lead performers rather than rigidly sticking to a tightly scripted approach for every scene. It was Ratner who is widely credited with the initial creative instinct to pair Tucker and Chan together in the first place, recognizing that the contrast between Tucker's manic comedic energy and Chan's more controlled physical comedy could create a genuinely compelling and funny dynamic if given room to breathe on screen. This directorial philosophy carried over into the sequel, where Ratner reportedly continued to give Tucker considerable latitude to improvise and riff during scenes, allowing his rapid-fire comedic instincts room to generate material beyond what was strictly written on the page. This approach, while contributing significantly to many of the film's most memorable comedic moments, was not without its own behind-the-scenes tension, as some reports from the production have indicated that Jackie Chan occasionally found himself frustrated by the pacing this created for the film's action sequences. Given that Chan's reputation and creative process as a performer and action choreographer had traditionally been built around meticulously planned, elaborately staged stunt sequences that could take considerable time to properly set up, rehearse, and execute safely. With the sequel's production needing to balance an ambitious international shooting schedule against a significant budget, some of Chan's more elaborate action sequences reportedly had to be conceived and executed in shorter, more condensed bursts than he might have preferred. A trade-off that speaks to the broader creative negotiation that took place throughout the production between prioritizing Chan's carefully choreographed physical comedy and accommodating the more loose, improvisational, comedic energy that Tucker and Ratner brought to the table. The physical toll of Jackie Chan's stunt work. No discussion of the making of any Jackie Chan film would be complete without addressing the extraordinary physical demands he placed on himself throughout the production, a defining characteristic of his entire career that remained true during the making of Rush Hour 2. Consistent with his long-standing reputation and personal philosophy as a performer, Chan continued to insist on performing the overwhelming majority of his own stunts throughout the film, refusing to rely on stunt doubles for sequences that many other action stars of his caliber would have almost certainly left to trained stunt performers given the inherent physical risk involved. This commitment to authenticity, while a major part of what made his action sequences so consistently impressive and beloved by audiences around the world, also meant that the production had to account for the very real possibility of injury throughout the shoot, a risk that had already manifested in serious ways multiple times earlier in Chan's career, including a near-fatal skull fracture he suffered during the filming of an earlier project years before Rush Hour 2 went into production. While Rush Hour 2 did not result in an injury on the scale of some of Chan's most infamous on-set accidents from earlier in his career, the general atmosphere on set during the filming of his action sequences was reportedly one of careful, practiced professionalism combined with genuine risk. As Chan's team of longtime collaborators worked to plan and execute his stunts as safely as possible while still capturing the kind of breathtaking, visceral physical comedy and action that audiences had come to specifically associate with his work. His approach to blending comedy directly into his fight choreography, treating stunt sequences almost like elaborate physical comedy routines rather than straightforward action beats, required an enormous amount of rehearsal and precise timing to execute properly, meaning that many of the film's most celebrated action sequences likely required numerous takes and considerable patience from the entire cast and crew in order to get every comedic and physical beat landing exactly as intended. The critical reception and on-set atmosphere. While the film's box office performance was undeniably a massive success, it is worth noting for a complete picture of the production's legacy that critical reception to Rush Hour 2 upon its release was somewhat more mixed than the film's commercial numbers might suggest. With some critics of the era feeling that the sequel leaned too heavily into Chris Tucker's rapid-fire comedic delivery at the expense of the more elaborately choreographed action sequences that had been a hallmark of Jackie Chan's career, echoing some of the same tension reportedly felt by Chan himself during the actual production regarding how much time and priority was given to his action choreography versus the film's comedic dialogue scenes. Despite this critical divide, virtually every account from those who worked on the production points to a set atmosphere that was, by most measures, a genuinely fun and light-hearted place to work, buoyed significantly by the authentic camaraderie and friendship that had developed between Chan and Tucker since their first collaboration. The tradition of including a blooper reel during the film's end credits, a practice Chan had long employed in his Hong Kong productions as a way of showing audiences the human, sometimes chaotic reality behind the polished action sequences they had just watched, became one of the most beloved elements of the finished film for many viewers, offering a direct window into the genuine laughter, mistakes, and playful ribbing that characterized much of the day-to-day filming experience. These outtakes captured everything from botched stunts and missed marks to Tucker's continued teasing of Chan and moments where the actors simply could not keep straight faces during a scene, giving audiences an authentic, unfiltered glimpse of the genuine chemistry and friendship that had made their on-screen partnership so successful in the first place. A partnership built not just on carefully crafted screenwriting but on the very real rapport between two performers who, despite an initial rocky start marked by uncertainty and a significant language and cultural gap, had grown into one of the most beloved comedic duos in the history of American action cinema by the time Rush Hour 2 hit theaters in the summer of 2001. The cultural and historical context of Rush Hour 2. Rush Hour 2 as a product of a specific cultural moment in Hollywood. To fully appreciate Rush Hour 2, it helps to understand the specific and somewhat unusual cultural moment in Hollywood history that made a film like it possible in the first place. Throughout the 1970s and much of the 1980s, Hong Kong martial arts cinema and mainstream American filmmaking existed largely as two separate worlds, occasionally intersecting through dubbed imports, grindhouse theaters, and a dedicated cult following in the United States, but rarely blending together in a single, big-budget studio production aimed at a mass American audience. Bruce Lee had briefly bridged that gap in the early 1970s before his untimely death, introducing American audiences to Hong Kong-style martial arts filmmaking through movies like Enter the Dragon. But in the decades that followed, Hong Kong action stars largely remained a niche interest for American viewers rather than a mainstream draw. This began to change gradually throughout the 1990s, as a growing number of American film fans and, crucially, American film industry insiders became increasingly aware of and influenced by Hong Kong action cinema, thanks in part to the rise of home video and later DVD, which allowed martial arts films that would never have received wide theatrical distribution in the United States to build passionate cult followings. Jackie Chan himself had actually attempted to break into the American market once before, decades prior to Rush Hour, with limited success, largely because American studios at that time did not fully understand how to market his particular blend of comedic timing and acrobatic stunt work to Western audiences accustomed to a different style of action filmmaking. It was not until the success of the original Rush Hour in 1998 that Hollywood truly demonstrated it could successfully translate Hong Kong-style action comedy for a mainstream American audience, and Rush Hour 2 arrived in 2001 as confirmation that this was not simply a fluke, but a genuinely viable and highly lucrative approach to blockbuster filmmaking. In this sense, Rush Hour 2 occupies an important place in the broader historical narrative of cultural exchange between Hong Kong and Hollywood, representing one of the clearest and most commercially successful examples of a mainstream American studio production built directly around Hong Kong filmmaking talent, aesthetics, and choreography. Made accessible to American audiences through the framing device of a buddy cop comedy. The historical and political backdrop of Hong Kong in the story. Rush Hour 2's decision to relocate much of its story to Hong Kong carries a layer of historical resonance that reflects the real-world status of the city at the time the film was made. Hong Kong had been returned to Chinese sovereignty in 1997, following more than a century and a half of British colonial rule, in a transition that was closely watched around the world and that fundamentally reshaped the city's political identity just a few years before Rush Hour 2 went into production. Under the terms of the handover agreement, Hong Kong was established as a special administrative region of China, operating under a framework often described as one country, two systems, which allowed the city to maintain a distinct legal, economic, and social structure separate from mainland China for a defined transitional period. This meant that at the time Rush Hour 2 was filmed and released, Hong Kong existed in a genuinely unique political and cultural space, no longer a British colony but not yet fully integrated into the mainland Chinese system either, retaining much of the distinct character, energy, and cosmopolitan flavor that had developed over generations of its history as a major international trading port and financial center. The film's Inspector Lee character, working as a Hong Kong police officer, exists within this specific post-handover context, and while Rush Hour 2 does not engage directly or explicitly with the political complexities of the handover itself, the film's setting implicitly reflects a Hong Kong that Western audiences of the era would have recently seen extensively covered in international news media, giving the setting a degree of contemporary relevance and recognizability beyond simply serving as an exotic backdrop for action set pieces. The film also captures, whether intentionally or simply as a byproduct of authentic location shooting, a visual snapshot of Hong Kong's distinctive urban landscape during this particular period, including its density, its blend of colonial-era architecture alongside modern skyscrapers, and its position as a genuinely global crossroads city where East and West, tradition and modernity, existed in close and constant proximity. The real history and cultural weight of the triad organizations depicted in the film. The criminal organization at the center of Rush Hour 2's plot draws directly on the real historical phenomenon of triad societies, a term used to describe a range of Chinese criminal organizations with roots that, according to various historical accounts, stretch back centuries, with some tracing elements of triad tradition to secret societies that originally formed for political or resistance purposes during earlier periods of Chinese history before evolving over time into organized criminal enterprises. By the 20th century, and particularly in the post-war decades, triad organizations had become deeply associated with organized crime in Hong Kong specifically, involved in activities ranging from extortion and gambling to drug trafficking and, relevant to Rush Hour 2's plot, various forms of financial crime including counterfeiting operations. Hong Kong's unique history as a British colony operating adjacent to mainland China created particular conditions that allowed triad organizations to develop significant influence within certain sectors of the local economy and society over many decades. A reality that became a recurring subject in Hong Kong's cinema long before Rush Hour 2, forming the backbone of an entire genre of Hong Kong crime and gangster films that had been popular with domestic audiences for decades prior to the Rush Hour franchise, bringing a version of this cinematic tradition to mainstream American audiences. When Rush Hour 2 built its central villain, Ricky Tan, and his criminal network around this real-world triad framework, the filmmakers were drawing on a well-established and culturally significant tradition within Hong Kong crime cinema, even as the film simplified and Americanized many of the specific details for the purposes of a mainstream action comedy aimed primarily at Western audiences. This grounding in a real, historically rooted criminal tradition gave the film's antagonist forces a degree of cultural authenticity and weight that helped distinguish Rush Hour 2's villains from more generic, interchangeable action movie bad guys, even within the context of a film that was, at its core, more focused on comedy and spectacle than on serious social or historical commentary regarding organized crime in Hong Kong. The real-world history behind the film's counterfeiting plot. The central criminal conspiracy driving the plot of Rush Hour 2, involving the mass production and distribution of extraordinarily high-quality counterfeit American currency, draws directly on a real and well-documented phenomenon that had been a significant topic of concern for American law enforcement and intelligence agencies in the years and decades leading up to the film's release. Beginning as early as the late 1980s, and becoming a subject of increasing public and governmental attention throughout the 1990s, American authorities became aware of an extraordinarily sophisticated category of counterfeit $100 bills that came to be known within law enforcement and media circles as superdollars, or supernotes. These counterfeit bills were remarkable for their exceptional quality, reportedly produced using printing technology and paper composition so advanced that the fake currency was, in many documented cases, virtually indistinguishable from genuine American currency even to trained bank tellers and, in some instances, to sophisticated counterfeit detection equipment. American government sources ultimately came to believe that North Korea was the most likely source of these superdollars, alleging that the North Korean government had established a state-run counterfeiting operation as one of several methods used to generate foreign currency to fund government activities, though it is worth noting that this attribution has, over the years, remained a subject of some debate and dispute among independent observers and other governments, given the genuinely covert and difficult-to-verify nature of international counterfeiting investigations. Regardless of the precise real-world source, the broader phenomenon of extraordinarily high-quality counterfeit $100 bills circulating internationally was a well-documented and genuinely alarming concern for American financial and law enforcement institutions throughout the 1990s. With congressional hearings and international investigations dedicated to tracking the scope of the problem in the years before Rush Hour 2 was written and produced, the film's screenwriters clearly drew on this real, contemporary anxiety when constructing the movie's central plot, tapping into genuine headlines and public awareness of the superdollar phenomenon to give the film's criminal conspiracy a foundation in something audiences of the era would have had at least passing familiarity with from real news coverage, lending an extra layer of topical relevance to what might otherwise have simply been a generic crime thriller plot device. Peking opera training and its deep influence on the film's two leading men. One of the more fascinating and lesser discussed cultural threads running through Rush Hour 2 involves the shared background that both of its two most significant Hong Kong-connected performers, Jackie Chan and John Lone, hold in common, namely their formative training within the demanding tradition of Peking opera schools during childhood. This connection is not something the film addresses directly within its own narrative, but it represents a significant piece of cultural and personal history that shaped both actors long before they ever appeared together on screen in Rush Hour 2. Peking opera, also referred to as Beijing opera, represents one of the most significant and historically rich forms of traditional Chinese performing art, combining elements of music, vocal performance, mime, dance, and acrobatics into a highly stylized theatrical tradition with roots extending back to the late 18th century. Throughout much of the 20th century, particularly in Hong Kong, formal opera schools existed that took in young children, often from families facing financial hardship, and subjected them to years of extraordinarily rigorous training in the various disciplines required to become skilled Peking opera performers, an educational tradition that, while producing performers of remarkable physical skill and discipline, was also frequently associated with harsh, sometimes brutal training methods. and strict corporal discipline for students who failed to meet exacting standards. Both Jackie Chan and John Lone were products of this specific educational and cultural tradition, having each been sent to train at Hong Kong opera schools as young children, spending the better part of a decade of their childhoods immersed in this demanding regimen of acrobatics, martial arts, singing, and traditional performance techniques. This shared background, though never explicitly referenced within Rush Hour 2 itself, provides an interesting layer of historical and cultural resonance for audiences aware of it, given that the physical grace, acrobatic capability, and performative discipline both actors bring to their respective roles as hero and villain in the film can be traced directly back to the same specific, historically significant Hong Kong cultural institution, one that has produced numerous other notable performers within the Hong Kong entertainment industry over the decades, including several of Jackie Chan's own closest collaborators and lifelong friends from his own opera school days. The buddy cop genre and Rush Hour 2's place within its history. Rush Hour 2 also deserves to be understood within the broader historical context of the buddy cop genre, a category of American filmmaking with roots extending back several decades before the Rush Hour franchise arrived on the scene. The buddy cop formula, generally built around pairing two mismatched law enforcement partners whose contrasting personalities, backgrounds, or approaches to police work generate both comedic tension and, ultimately, mutual respect and friendship, had already produced numerous significant and commercially successful films by the time the original Rush Hour was released in 1998. With earlier entries in the genre throughout the 1980s and early 1990s frequently built around pairings that crossed racial lines as a central comedic and thematic device, using the contrast between characters of different racial or cultural backgrounds as a vehicle for exploring, in a broadly comedic register, questions of cultural difference, prejudice, and eventual understanding between people from different walks of life. Rush Hour and its sequel took this well-established genre formula and pushed it in a somewhat new direction by centering its central pairing not around a black and white American duo, the more common configuration in earlier buddy cop films, but instead around an African-American character and a Hong Kong Chinese character. A combination that had not previously been explored at this level of mainstream box office success within the genre. This particular configuration allowed the Rush Hour films to engage with questions of cultural difference and cross-cultural communication in a way that felt somewhat fresh within the genre's history, even as the films remained firmly committed to a broadly comedic, crowd-pleasing tone rather than attempting any deeper or more serious exploration of the cultural dynamics at play between its two leads. The significant commercial success of both films demonstrated a clear and substantial audience appetite for this particular cross-cultural buddy pairing, and the franchise's success arguably helped pave the way for later Hollywood productions willing to more frequently feature Asian and Asian American performers in prominent, marketable leading roles within major studio productions. Even as broader industry conversations about representation and opportunity for Asian performers in Hollywood continued to evolve considerably in the years and decades following Rush Hour 2's release. Questions of cultural representation and critical perspectives on the film. Any thorough discussion of Rush Hour 2's cultural significance would be incomplete without acknowledging that the film, like many buddy comedies built around cross-cultural pairings, has also been the subject of critical discussion and debate regarding its handling of cultural representation and humor rooted in cultural difference. Some critics and cultural commentators, both at the time of the film's release and in subsequent years, have noted that certain elements of the film's comedy rely on broad cultural stereotyping for their humor, whether through jokes centered around cultural misunderstanding, exaggerated characterizations, or comedic scenarios that draw on simplified or reductive depictions of Hong Kong culture and society filtered through the lens of Chris Tucker's brash, fish-out-of-water American character. This kind of critical perspective is not unique to Rush Hour 2 and reflects broader, ongoing conversations within American film criticism and cultural studies regarding how mainstream Hollywood comedies of this era frequently handled cross-cultural humor, often prioritizing accessible, broadly appealing jokes over more nuanced or sensitive engagement with the cultures being depicted or referenced. At the same time, many defenders of the film and of the broader Rush Hour franchise have pointed to the genuine warmth and mutual respect that ultimately defines the relationship between Carter and Lee by the end of each film as evidence that the franchise, whatever its comedic shortcuts along the way, was fundamentally built around the story of cross-cultural friendship and partnership rather than one designed to demean or belittle either character's cultural background. The film's decision to give Jackie Chan's character genuine emotional depth, particularly through the storyline involving his father's death and his complicated history with the film's central villain, also reflects an attempt, however balanced against the film's broader comedic instincts, to treat its Hong Kong setting and characters with a degree of narrative seriousness and respect that went beyond simply using the location as an exotic backdrop for American-centered comedy. These ongoing critical conversations around representation in films like Rush Hour 2 reflect the broader evolution of cultural attitudes and expectations regarding on-screen representation that have continued to develop significantly in the years since the film's original release in 2001. Las Vegas as a historical and cultural setting for the film's climax. The decision to relocate the final act of Rush Hour 2 to Las Vegas carries its own layer of historical and cultural significance, particularly given that much of the film's climactic casino sequence was filmed on location at the historic Desert Inn, a property that occupied a genuinely significant place in the broader history of Las Vegas as an entertainment and gambling destination. The Desert Inn had originally opened in the early 1950s and had, over the subsequent decades, established itself as one of the more storied and important properties along the Las Vegas Strip, playing host to numerous significant moments in the city's cultural history and standing as one of the resorts that helped define the glamorous, mid-century image of Las Vegas that would go on to become deeply embedded in American popular culture more broadly. By the time Rush Hour 2 filmed its climactic sequences there in late 2000, the property was in its final years of operation before eventually being closed and demolished in the early 2000s to make way for a newer development. Meaning that Rush Hour 2 inadvertently preserved on film one of the last significant cinematic appearances of a genuinely historic piece of Las Vegas architecture and cultural history before it was lost entirely to the city's constant, ongoing cycle of redevelopment and reinvention. This gives the film an additional, somewhat unintentional layer of historical documentary value for those interested in the history of Las Vegas as a physical place, capturing a version of the city's iconic strip that, in the specific form seen in the film, no longer exists today. More broadly, the choice to set the film's climax in Las Vegas at all reflects the city's long-standing symbolic role within American popular culture as a location associated with excess, spectacle, high-stakes risk, and moral ambiguity, themes that align naturally with a story centered around a criminal conspiracy involving enormous sums of money and elaborate deception, making Las Vegas a fitting, almost archetypal choice of setting for the film's climactic confrontation between its heroes and the criminal network they have spent the entire film pursuing. The franchise's broader legacy within American and Hong Kong cinema history. Looking at Rush Hour 2 from the vantage point of film history more broadly, its cultural significance extends well beyond its immediate commercial success at the time of its release. The film played a meaningful role in cementing Jackie Chan's status as a genuine, bankable leading man within mainstream American cinema, a status that had eluded him during earlier attempts to break into the Hollywood market decades before Rush Hour, and this newfound level of American stardom subsequently opened doors for Chan to pursue a range of other major Hollywood productions throughout the following decade, extending his career and international visibility considerably beyond what might have been possible had he remained focused primarily on the Hong Kong film industry. Similarly, the film's success helped further establish Chris Tucker's standing as one of the most bankable comedic actors of his generation, even as his subsequent career would go on to be defined by a notably selective and infrequent approach to film roles compared to many of his contemporaries. Beyond its impact on the individual careers of its two leading men, Rush Hour 2 also stands as a significant data point within the broader historical narrative of increasing, if still gradual and often contested, opportunities for Asian and Asian American performers within major Hollywood productions. A conversation that would continue to evolve considerably in the years following the film's release as the American film industry slowly began to grapple more seriously with questions of representation, casting, and the kinds of stories being told about and by Asian and Asian American communities on screen. The film's massive commercial success also reinforced, at a pivotal moment in Hollywood's ongoing relationship with international box office markets, the tremendous value that could come from productions willing to authentically engage with international settings, international creative talent, and cross-cultural storytelling. A lesson that would continue to shape the calculations of major Hollywood studios in the years and decades that followed as the global box office became an increasingly central consideration in blockbuster filmmaking decisions. Taken together, all of these layered historical and cultural threads, from the real-world political status of post-handover Hong Kong, to the genuine historical weight of triad organized crime and the superdollar counterfeiting phenomenon, to the deep cultural roots of Peking opera training shared by its two Hong Kong-connected stars, to its place within the broader evolution of the buddy cop genre and Hollywood's relationship with Hong Kong's cinema, make Rush Hour 2 a film that, beneath its surface as a purely commercial action comedy, is deeply embedded within a rich and genuinely significant web of real-world cultural and historical context.